I'd like to start, however, with a personal feeling. Loretta, how are you feeling today, knowing that your country, the focus, the spot is on the United States, maybe your hopes and the fears? How do you feel personally today?
Well, I'm hopeful that I think that there will be a change in the president after the election today. So that makes me really hopeful because a lot of people have voted already. And my biggest fear is that Trump is reelected. So yes, but I'm hopeful. I think it will be a change. I think tomorrow will be a sign of new things to come.
Okay, thank you. Loretta, before we start talking about the system, can you please tell us something about yourself? What do you do here? What is your connection to the IC?
Well, here my role is an educator in the Kinderbewegungshaus. And every day I get to work with children and teaching English, my native language, and doing it in a very fun and very relaxed way, in a very relaxed environment, and get to do that in very creative ways that allows me to express my interest and share lots of things with the children that are part of my culture and my growing up and my country and my experiences. So yeah, that's my connection to the ASC and my continued connection to children, which has always been my life's work.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned a very important word there. You said the word culture. And we both work in immersion. We both work in language learning. And it's not enough just to speak the language with the children. It's more than that. It's the depth. It's bringing your origin, your culture, your background, your heritage into this language learning, which is why we're here today, because we want to talk about the election in the United States. We want to know how the people feel there. Okay, I'd like to get down a little bit to the nitty-gritty now. Loretta, please tell us, who is voting today and when are they voting?
Well, today, any person who is over the age of 18 and have registered to vote, who is a citizen and have residency in any of the 50 states, can vote today. And that's millions of people across the 50 states, plus the District of Columbia.
Mm-hmm. Are there any groups in society who are not allowed to vote, although they're adults? Is anybody excluded from the voting system today?
People who are not citizens, so you must be a citizen to vote, and even people who are and you have to have residency in one of the states. However, homeless people are allowed to vote. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Even if they're homeless in a state, they still have residency in that state, so they can also vote. People who cannot vote also are people who are prisoners in prison, people who have been in prison that committed felonies, were convicted, served time in prison. Some people that serve time but are still on either probation or they're out on parole cannot vote in some states. However, some laws have changed in the recent years that allow felons to vote after a certain number of years being out of prison. Mm-hmm. But typically in many of the states they cannot vote.
Because that's quite, no, I don't want to say it is quite a large group of people who are absolutely excluded from taking part today in this very important decision. Mm-hmm. How can one vote?
Well, there are several ways that you can vote. You can vote what is called absentee balloting, which is how I vote, because I cannot go in person on election day. So I request a ballot. I receive an official ballot, and I have to fill it out and then send it in and follow all the procedures for it to count. So absentee balloting. Also, people can mail in their ballots. They can request a ballot in the mail, stateside. So they request a ballot. They can take it, fill it out, and mail it in the regular post. They can also drop their ballots in a ballot box. They have official boxes in all the states and in certain locations. And so you can fill out your ballot and drop it in this official ballot box. So it's absentee, mail-in. You can post the ballot, or you can vote in person. So today, on November 3rd, many of the people who have not voted will vote in person, which means that they will go to their polling place. And many of the polling places can be things like schools or sometimes in churches, wherever they set aside a specific location, and people go and they vote in person.
Mm-hmm. How accessible are these polling stations today? Because I think that was a little bit of the discussion now, that some polling stations which are close to a large part of the population have actually been closed down, and it involves long traveling distances to actually get there to ballot one's, to place one's ballot.
Well, that is in this election a very heated debate topic, because a lot of polling places were closed down, and for some people, some segments of the population, it is very inconvenient or a very big hardship. For example, in some counties, which can include many small cities, they would have one ballot box in one place. So if you live in another city or another part of that county, then you would have to go to one place. So everybody is expected to go to one place. So it is a hardship for some people who don't maybe have access to transportation. Then it creates a hardship for some people to get to the place to vote. Mm. And some have been changed at the last minute without sending out any information. So if you live in a place where you vote, you've voted for many years in one place, and then suddenly this year it's a different place and no one notified you, and people show up to vote where they think they should vote, and it's someplace different.
Yeah, it could be considered as a type of discrimination.
Well, the term at the moment is suppression, because it creates hardships rather than easy access to voting.
It's been a big, what should I say, a big subject this time, this question of voter intimidation, which is of course not legal, and suppression. Could you just tell us something about this voter suppression? I mean, one way of doing it is closing down local stations, but what other types of suppression are taking
There
place?
have been many types, like misinformation. People receive telephone calls, especially like senior citizens, in areas where there's a large number of senior citizens. It's called robocalls. They get these telephone calls and they tell them that they cannot vote if they haven't had a flu shot, or just various scenarios that have been reported that they tell them things that's not really true. And sometimes because they're older, they believe it without really questioning, or maybe they don't have someone to sort these things out for them. But that's one of the things that they're doing. Also, that they put in some polling stations very few people to assist with the voting, so that when people go to vote, the lines are very, very long. There were reports where people were lining up for blocks and blocks and blocks to go and vote, waiting sometimes up to 5 hours to go in, to actually get inside to vote. So not having enough staff, or having so few polling places where they've limited the number, and so it's so many people that the lines are just really long, and many people, depending on where they live and the weather or their health, it's just not something that a lot of people are capable or willing to do. For personal reasons. And
obviously in the midst of this corona pandemic, that's also another question, you know, am I going to go to the polling station? Do I want to stand in a queue for hours with a lot of other people, maybe be crushed together, which has led to a lot of people deciding then to mail their vote, or of course do it like that. Today is actually the presidential election. So let's get down to that. The Americans are choosing a new president.
Or re-electing the current one.
Re-electing the current one, you're quite right. Now, how is a president chosen in the US?
Well, it's a complex system for many who haven't been a part of it and who don't really understand it. There are two parts to it. The first part is the popular vote. And that's when people like me cast a ballot and vote for our choice for president. So in each of the 50 states, people, and the District of Columbia, people get to vote for a president. And that is called the popular vote. So in every state, so people go and vote, early voting up to the actual election day, so that people cast ballots. So that is all the popular vote. So if I absentee ballot, or somebody mail in, or drop box, or vote in person, those are the popular votes, because those are the votes of the people. And the second part of it is that there is what is called the Electoral College. And that's the part that gets a bit complicated, because the Electoral College is a group of electors, and each state, each of the 50 states, gets 2 electors, because each state has 2 senators, so you have at least 2, and depending on your population, and that's the official population from the census. So the districts in a state, you have representatives. And for each representative for a state, you get 1 elector. So for 1 representative, you get an elector. For example, California, the biggest state with the most electors, they have 55. So they get 2 for each of their senators, and then they get 53 because they have 53 representatives for a total of 55 electors. I'm from Texas, and we have the second largest. We have 38. And so these electors, and who these people are they're people that are chosen by the party in each state to cast the official ballot for that state. So in California, there are 55 people that will get to vote as the Electoral College. So that group is the Electoral College. So they will get to cast an official vote for president. So the electors were set up originally to vote for the president according to how the population votes. So in California, if Joe Biden has the most votes, then he would get 55 electoral votes. And because most of the states actually follow, it's the winner takes all. And so with the electoral votes, to become president, you need 270 votes, electoral votes. And so the people, like my vote, counts, but it only counts to make the majority of the votes. So in Texas, if my vote puts Biden in the lead, then the Electoral College comes along, and then if he wins the state of Texas, then he gets 38 votes. And that's how the process works. So my vote doesn't actually make him president.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
My vote only helps the Electoral College decide which person to vote for.
Mm-hmm. I know that this has historical reasons, but can you perhaps tell us the pros of the system? What are the advantages of this Electoral College casting their votes for the choice of a president?
Well, one of the things is that, and originally it was set up to give each state a say in who becomes president. Some states are really small and they only have 3. California is really huge and it has 55, and it has a larger population than 20 other states, 20 of the smallest states, which is a total of 96. So California has more people than 20 states that have 96 electoral votes, but they only have 55. So those states are important because when you add up all the small states as well, it helps you to get to 270. So for smaller states, that means they cannot completely ignore you. They still need to win. Somebody needs to try and win in your state. So it gives them some access to the system. It's not all the big states. Of course, the people who vote all over have a part in it. So the advantage for the middle states, which always in most recent elections have become the most important. California is typically voting in one way. Texas typically is voting in one way, and it's kind of been steady. But then the states in the middle, not the smallest ones, but the ones that are right in the middle, around 20 electoral votes, those are the ones that are really, really important because those are the swing states or battleground states. Because if you get 20, that's a nice sum after 55 and 38, and you start getting to 18, 20, 21 electoral votes. So the two-party system, they can map out a strategy. So that's one of the benefits. They can strategically campaign, spend their campaign money. They can address the people in those areas to help them to get to 270. So the goal is always to get to 270. It's not that they love every state or they want to go to every state and spend money in every state. They're being very strategic. And so some of those smaller states get a lot of attention because they could make the difference in getting to that magic number of 270. Mm-hmm. And some of the criticisms are when people vote, the election may be, like in one state, for example, in 2016, the difference was like 3,000 votes in one state between the winner and the loser. And so then people say then it's not really a fair system because it's so close and the winner takes all, but when it's that close, why not a percentage? So there have been people who wanted to change the Electoral College to make it more fair as a percentage of how the population votes. But then it becomes a lot more complex also. these percentages. And so there's people that like the way it is and want it to continue because it's winner takes all. So if you win the state, that means the politicians have to work really, really hard to win states, whatever their strategy is. They have to try and win the states. And some people feel like, well, it's not fair if you lose a state by 2,000 votes and then you get all of the Electoral College votes. So it's kind of an issue. It's been around since the founding fathers, and they've debated it a lot and probably not likely to change when it comes to the voting. But there are a lot of court cases that have to do with voting, and to change something would take a constitutional amendment. And that's a very tall order.
Definitely. So it's not really a question, is it still fit for its purpose today? It's more of a question that the work and energy one would have to put into it to change the system. You're talking about changing the constitution. Exactly, would be so exhausting and probably so time consuming and expensive that the Electoral College is here to stay, probably.
I think so, and because if the other idea of having it as a percentage would just be so much more complicated than saying, okay, you won the state, and now you have the electoral votes for that state finished.
Exactly.
And that's one of the advantages also of the Electoral College, is that once the voting is counted, there's a winner, the votes are awarded, and then that's the end of the election. It's a conclusion.
Okay. I think that's a very important thing for us outsiders to understand, because we sometimes find it very difficult to understand how you can win the popular vote, but of course lose the presidency. And we have to know that the Electoral College is extremely important. You have to get these 270 votes, then you're in. It's a clear system, and one can discuss the fairness of it. However, one has actually elected these people who then cast their votes for us. I do have a question here, however. One talks about these faithless electors. What is a faithless elector?
Well, a faithless elector it turns out to be a very powerful person, which means that that elector did not follow the votes of the people. So if the people in that state declared a winner, voted, and somebody was clearly a winner, and the faithless electors, because after the election, it's projected, it's not official until in December. The Electoral College actually votes in December.
Okay, that's an important point. Maybe we should be clear about this. So the popular vote will be cast today.
Today.
You're voting today. But the Electoral College will not sit until December. That's correct.
Right.
And will not cast their votes until December.
Right.
Right. Okay, so this is an important point for us. All right, so this faithless elector would cast their vote in December.
And so a faithless elector, instead of following the population of the state, would vote for the other person. That's why they're faithless. That's why they call them faithless electors, because there is nothing you can't, there's no consequence if they don't follow the population. Nothing happens to them. They've been entrusted. They get to vote, and it's happened twice. Well, it happened in 2016 because actually Trump did not win the popular vote, but he won the Electoral College vote because there were faithless electors that voted for him in 2016. Also in the year 2000, it happened between Bush and Gore. was the same thing. So it has happened, 16-year difference, and it's happened 4 times in history. So in the 1800s and 19 something, but it's happened 4 times, and the 2000 and 2016 were very close compared to the other times that it's happened. So once they vote in December, they cast their votes, and then the election itself is certified, and that's where it's then official, and that happens in January. And then on the 20th of January, there's the inauguration, which is either it will be an inauguration for a re-elected president or an inauguration to transfer the White House from Trump to Biden.
I'd like to get back to these swinger states, or these battleground states. You mentioned it slightly before. We know these are the states where they're sort of middle-sized states, if I've understood correctly, where it could go this way or that way. We don't know, and where obviously the nominees are investing and have invested an awful lot of energy and time now trying to reach the people. You said we wouldn't get the results. Well, the electors don't cast their votes, their ballots, until December, but there will be some sort of a result today or later today. How does this work? You said winner takes all, but there are also these states where it's not like that. Which states are we talking about here, these battleground states, and why can it go either way? What happens today is that people vote. And all of the states that have absentee ballots and early voting, some have already started counting, but everybody will be counting their ballots today. So as they are counting, they will put the projections. They'll say, 50% of the ballots have been counted, tabulated. And the projection is Biden this, Trump this, whatever the percentages are. And so whatever you get today is projections, because all of the votes will not be counted. And the reason all of them are not counted, like absentee ballots, say from a military base in Germany, they have until today to have a postmarked ballot. And that postmarked ballot is counted. So if it arrives today, they will count it. Maybe it's not counted today. Maybe it's counted tomorrow, depending on how many they have to go through. Because absentee ballots are paper ballots, like this. So this was my actual envelope. So they are paper ballots, and so that somebody has to open them and put them through to be tabulated as well. And that's also part of the suppression that is going on, that they want the ballots, whatever's counted today, to count. And it's always been, it had to be marked by election day, and then it counts. And so whenever you get in the night, the projected winner, and they'll tell you with 95% of the ballots tabulated or whatever percentage. And sometimes it changes a little bit when they start, they'll get them 98% until all the ballots that will be counted are counted. Another part of the suppression this year is that when you vote, you have to sign, and officially. And what a lot of places started to do is they wanted to check the signature from either your voter registration card or some previous, and that it has to match. So they were trying to throw out a lot of ballots in early balloting, because they said, oh, signatures didn't match.
and things like this. And so there is actually a court case because they wanted to throw out already in this cycle, in early voting, 127,000 ballots. And so these are the things that, you know, fall into this suppression, because when you sign something, who signs everything exactly the same? And so, and who's to say it's not my signature and they said that's a judgment call, but yeah.
Okay, right. So we can expect to hear the first results sometime in the next 24 hours.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The projected winner.
Projected results, but these results will not be confirmed until
all the ballots are counted, and then actually in December, when the Electoral College votes, because by then all the ballots are in that will be counted, because they always throw out some ballots for whatever reason. So whatever is officially counted, then the Electoral College will vote, because especially when it's really, really close, like percentage points, then, yeah, they say projected winner, but sometimes it flips if it's very, very close, and especially smaller races. But
so it's quite a long system. The Americans have been voting now for quite a long time because of this postal vote and the absentee vote. Then there's a popular vote today, projections, perhaps one of them will say, I'm president. Then there's Electoral College, then there's confirmation, and then the inauguration on the 20th of March. It's quite a long...
No, January.
20th
of January.
Sorry, my mistake, of course, January. Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about the candidates a little bit of their pitch. I don't know, could you give me, let's start with Joe Biden. Could you give me sort of, I don't know, three points from his policy or his pitch, what he's trying to get over to the American person on the street, or has been trying to?
The first one that is clearly important to a lot of people is response to the pandemic. He has a plan for addressing the pandemic, and so that's his big pitch, is that, you know, this thing about masks. So the pandemic. The second one is the Affordable Care Act, which is referred to as Obamacare, which provides health care to millions of Americans who were uninsured or uninsurable because they had pre-existing conditions, which didn't mean that they couldn't get insurance, but the prices were so exorbitant that many people could not afford to be insured. And also the idea of police reform. Because of course in the summer we had a lot of news about police reform and things along that line. So they have a plan to address that, and those are some of the important issues that the people have expressed a desire to address, and so those are maybe
the main points.
three of his main points.
Okay, and Donald Trump, what is his pitch?
Stock market, the economy, and tax breaks.
Okay, yeah. What I found fascinating are these rallies. We all know Trump and Biden been on the road, been all over the country. Their rallies had a different flavor to them. Obviously, Trump trying to be among the masses, trying to reach, getting close to everybody, and Biden being very careful with his corona pandemic policy keeping apart, saying come in your cars, come in your masks, trying to show that he's taking the pandemic seriously. What is the fascination of a political rally for the American people?
Well, actually, during a pandemic, I'm not real clear, but for some people, they're very motivated. If they're working in a campaign, it seems to energize them that the candidate is there in person and they can hear him or whoever it is in person. But also for the candidates, I think, is to go to the people to state your case, to let the people hear you, not just on TV or on the radio, or but to go to the people where the people can see you. And prior to this election cycle, the candidates were out, of course, a lot more and going to different states and meeting very large crowds of people to hear them speak. And for some people, that's really important to hear the candidate. And then it's important for the candidates because they want people motivated. So they want to go out and motivate their people and have them cheer them on so that they are also motivated to win the election and to go from place to place to place, because there has been a fascination with crowd size, how big the crowds are. Of course, during the pandemic, it's kind of an oxymoron because it seems that big crowds with no mask is making the pandemic that much worse. But people choose to do that. I personally don't understand that somebody would do that, but yeah, some people like that, the crowd and the energy, and yeah.
Today, the Americans are not only voting for president, they're also voting for a vice president.
Right.
We have teams out there. Perhaps you could tell us something about the election of the vice president.
Well, for the Democrats, of course, it would be a very historical win should the Democrats win the White House, because there's a female vice president, which we've never had in the U.S. And not only is she female, but she's also a minority female. She's part Indian and part black. So it's historic in that sense. And also that she is very young compared to the presidential candidates, and very accomplished in her own right, and possibly could be on the road to becoming the president one day. So that's historical. And also for a lot of people, it's on one side, it's very motivational. Of course, she's a woman of color. It would be a first. So for a lot of people, that's a very huge point. On the other side, there are people that, quite frankly, thinks that there's never a woman that should be president, and so it's brought out a lot of sexist comments and things, because she is basically, as they say, the vice president is a heartbeat away from being president. And when you have candidates both in their 70s, it's not far-fetched to think that the vice president could be president in 4 years when they're both in their 70s.
That's right. In the media, I once heard a lot about the fact that this year the women are going to win the election. The women are going to play quite a big role. I'm talking about the female vote. The female vote, exactly. Can you comment on this?
Well, I think part of it is because there's a woman on the ticket as a vice presidential candidate, and that's very motivating for a lot of women. And the other part is that it would be a first, and so people are motivated. And then on the other side, some of the comments that have been levied because there is a woman on the ticket have motivated people as well to say, you know, either I'm for it or not, and so she's a factor for sure. But yeah, and we've seen with some of the women governors and some of the women senators that have had really a hard time with some of the public comments made by male colleagues and male politicians, and it either motivates people or it disparages them. So it's kind of a strong sense this way or that way.
Mm-hmm. Our time is unfortunately slowly running out. I have two more questions, and some of these questions came from our internet listeners and audience. Thank you very much for these questions. One of the questions is, shortly, can Donald Trump legally challenge a Biden win? So if Biden should win, can and will Trump, in your opinion, challenge this?
I absolutely think he will challenge. Mm-hmm. He's said as much because he's said on a number of occasions the only way he would lose is if it was somehow rigged. So, and he said he had his lawyers ready. So if he loses, I think for sure he will challenge and go to the courts. And usually what they do when they go to the courts, either they try to get recounts or have ballots thrown out, which they're trying to do already from the early voting, is to throw out as many as possible. But in elections, states have a lot of power. So each state, in that sense, is its own entity. They can, their elections, they manage their elections, and the votes and all these things are, each state is responsible for their election. So if he's challenging things, he would have to challenge it in a state, which means that he would have to go to that state. If he loses, he could appeal and take it to the next level, and eventually he would probably like to get to the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court typically allow the states to decide on their elections and what is in and out. So he will probably do that just to muddy the waters and also to prolong the process as much as possible. But even in 2000, when there was a Supreme Court case in the Al Gore, George Bush case, it was done still in time for inauguration. Okay. So, yeah, whatever they do, it will be very speedy. The courts will rule, and it will not go on and on and on.
Mm-hmm. My final question: why do the Americans vote for their president on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November?
That is from the Founding Fathers. It's every first Tuesday in November, every 4 years. That's etched in stone.
Okay. I heard it had something to do with the farmers. They've got the harvest in, and maybe in that time they've got more time to actually go and cast their votes. And
it may be because when the Constitution, everything was the North and the South, and And the South was huge in farming and with cotton and tobacco, and they were, and they had a lot of power because they were very rich. The South was very rich when they were writing the Constitution, and that's why we have a lot of these things that seem outdated, but they were done to try and balance the more powerful states or the wealthier states.
Okay. Well, the eyes of the world will be on the United States today and tomorrow. I wish you the very much of luck, and we have hope. It will be a safe, and I really hope, a safe election for the American people. Thank you very much, Loretta, for being here today, for answering all my questions. And perhaps in a couple of days we can rediscuss. And hopefully reflect.
That would be great.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to say? A last sentence?
Yes, I'm expecting a blue wave.
Okay.
Yes, I'm expecting a blue wave.
Well, that's a nice way to finish. Thank you very much.